The diner smelled of coffee and fried eggs, a place where the booth sagged slightly from decades of use, and the jukebox in the corner still hummed songs nobody played anymore. For most of the regulars, it was comfort. For a man like Harold Brooks, it was routine. At 78 years old, wearing his pressed old army jacket no matter the weather, Harold had been part of the diner's morning landscape for years. He'd sit in the corner booth, order black coffee, and fold his newspaper neatly, eyes scanning headlines with the slow, deliberate patience of a man who'd seen a world change more times than he could count. On this particular Tuesday morning, the diner was quieter than usual. A few truckers occupied the counter, sipping their cups in silence. A young waitress refilled salt shakers, humming softly. Harold adjusted his cap, the faded insignia of his infantry division barely visible now, and let the warmth of the mug rest between his hands. His knees ached, but standing in line for coffee, sitting beneath fluorescent lights, these things grounded him. He didn't miss much anymore, except his wife. The bell over the door clanged hard as a younger man stormed in, bringing with him the kind of energy everybody immediately noticed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, early 30s maybe, wearing a ball cap backward and sunglasses indoors like armor. His voice carried before he even spoke, irritation laced under each step. Most customers glanced, recognized trouble before trouble began, and looked away again. Everyone except Harold, who hadn't learned to fear loud voices. He'd fought real wars. The man stomped to the counter, slapped a wallet down. "Service in this place is garbage," he scoffed. "What's a guy gotta do to get a hot breakfast?" His tone dripped with entitlement, each word tossed out to demand attention rather than request it. The waitress hurried from her task, plastering on professional calm. "Morning, sir. What can I get started for you?" He rolled his eyes, muttering something foul about lazy small-town slobs, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few truckers stiffened but said nothing, unwilling to start a scene before morning roots. Harold calmly folded his newspaper and sipped his coffee, eyes flicking once toward the man, then back again. A career in uniform had taught him patience, even when arrogance strutted in. But the bully wasn't looking for patience. He was hunting for someone weaker to trample. He turned sharply toward Harold's corner booth, noticing the faded army jacket, the slow, careful way the old veteran lifted his hand to drink. "Well, look at you," he sneered loudly. "Didn't know they served relics in here. Army boy, huh? Protecting us with your cane and bad hips?" He barked a laugh, slapping the countertop for effect. The diner went quiet. Harold set his cup down with care and met the younger man's stare steadily. His expression wasn't anger. It was the kind of calm that only irritates bullies more. "Morning," Harold said quietly, voice gravel with age but edged with steadiness. "Some of us did our part. Now it's up to yours." The words weren't meant to sting, but arrogance twisted them into insult. The bully's grin sharpened, and he stomped toward the booth, ignoring the hush of every eye watching. He leaned over Harold's table, blocking the light. "Say that again, old man. Say something slick again." Harold didn't flinch. He looked up, unblinking. "Thou heard me just fine." Fury sparked in the bully's eyes. He'd come looking for attention and found resistance. Not much, but enough. And that was enough to provoke his pride. His voice rose louder. "You think you get respect just for being old? For throwing on some jacket from back when black and white TV was a thing? This ain't your America anymore, Grandpa." The words tore silence across the diner. Even the jukebox seemed to falter. The waitress froze halfway to the kitchen, the coffee pot trembling faintly in her hand. No one dared move. Harold's jaw didn't harden, but sadness touched his eyes. He had fought for that right, the right for people like this man to speak freely, even when what they said cut like glass. But respect, that was different. Respect had always been earned, and he would never beg for it. "Sit yourself down," Harold said softly, not as plea, but as order. "Don't make this worse for yourself." The bully's pride couldn't handle that. His hand shot forward suddenly, palm stinging across Harold's cheek in a vicious slap that echoed off tile and chrome. Gasps filled the diner. The waitress nearly dropped the coffee pot. A trucker muttered, "Jesus," but didn't rise. Harold's head tilted from the strike, but he stayed seated. He blinked once, his cheek reddening, then looked back up at the younger man with the same steady calm. For the first time, the bully seemed slightly thrown by the lack of reaction. Violence usually gave him dominance. Now it had given him silence. But the silence didn't stay empty. A voice rose from the back booth, fierce with anger. That was a mistake. Every head turned. A man pushed back his chair, taller than the bully, lean with sharp edges of muscle, dressed not in wealth but in the plain navy suit of someone who wore respect like second skin. His eyes carried authority, trained intensity that never quite left those in positions of command. He walked forward slowly, measured, every step deliberate. The bully stiffened. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" The man stopped beside Harold's booth, his hand gripping the backrest gently, protectively. His jaw tightened as he looked at the old veteran, his eyes checking the red mark blossoming on Harold's cheek. Then he turned his stare, hard, unmovable, back at the bully. "I'm his son," he said flatly. The words landed heavier than fists. "And your night just ended." The diner erupted in gasps. The son's presence carried weight, but it was the next words, spoken without theatrics but with grave clarity, that drained the blood from the bully's face. "I'm Director Brooks, United States Homeland Security." And the whole diner froze, as the bully realized he hadn't slapped another nameless old man. He had struck the father of one of the most powerful figures in the nation. The words hung heavier than the fluorescent lights buzzing above. Director Brooks, Homeland Security. Like a hammer dropped onto the table, they shattered the illusion the bully had of control. The bulletproof smirk he wore faltered, sliding off his face as quickly as sweat began to bead at his temples. The diner stayed hushed, every customer glued to the unfolding storm. One of the truckers muttered under his breath, "Homeland!" But no one dared speak louder. Everybody knew. If the federal government had sons, this was one of them. The bully's bravado hiccuped as he straightened his cap, his sneakers squeaking against linoleum. I don't care who you say you are," he blurted, his words sharp like knives dulled from overuse. "You don't just claim titles. This is ridiculous." But even as he spoke, his voice lacked conviction. Homeland Security directors weren't the kind you argued with. They were men who lived in war rooms, who briefed presidents, who held classified files that could unravel lives. The diner understood. And now the bully did too. Director Brooks's expression never shifted from stone. His hand briefly touched Harold's shoulder, a gesture that communicated both son and soldier. "Are you all right, Dad?" Harold nodded slowly, wincing faintly where the slap had landed. "I've been through worse," he said with a half-smile. Still, the flicker of relief in his eyes at seeing his son there betrayed deeper truth. This wasn't a battlefield, but humiliation often cut deeper than bullets. The bully tried to recover ground. He gestured awkwardly with his hands, looking around for allies. This is crazy. I didn't know." "How could I know? He's just—" The pause burned. Every diner patron leaned forward, anger coiling. The bully realized far too late what he had said. He's just what? Old, black, disposable. The words unsaid screamed louder than the ones that stumbled out. Director Brooks's voice etched across the silence, like steel dragged against stone. "He's not just anything. He's a U.S. veteran, he's my father. And tonight you reminded this room how dangerously easy it is for men like you to unleash cruelty on people you think are invisible." The waitress at the counter shifted nervously, her knuckles white on the coffee pot's handle. She whispered, "Do you want me to call someone?" Director Brooks's gaze snapped once to her, softened, then returned to the bully. "No need. I'm already here." Then louder to the whole diner, "Every one of you is a witness." Gasps tinged with breathless relief followed. Witnesses, legal language, proof this wouldn't be brushed aside. For once, an attack on an elderly man in a small-town diner wasn't just destined to be a fleeting headline at the bottom of a newspaper. The bully's skin, flushed, beet red. His hand twitched at his side as fight wrestled with flight inside him. He was built for intimidation, for sneers and mockery, not for being held accountable in front of an entire room. The weight of the title, Homeland Security, pressed down on him until his legs itself began to betray him. A slight tremble at the knees. "I didn't mean," he stammered. "It was a joke. Everyone here, you saw it was—" "You slapped my father," Brooks cut sharp, his eyes narrowing. "Don't you dare shrink from what you did. You wanted dominance. You wanted a room to fear you. Now you'll learn how fear looks back." The waitress set the coffee pot down nervously on the counter. Some of the truckers, emboldened by Brooks's calm ferocity, stood partially from their stools. One said firmly, "We all saw it. Don't let him spin it." The bully barked a hollow laugh, sweat dripping now from his jawline. "You're all exaggerating." "It was one little—" "Strike," Brooks interrupted again. "One act that told this room exactly who you are. Men are measured not when they face equals, but when they face those they think can't fight back. My father didn't raise his voice, didn't raise his hand, and still you struck him." The words dug roots. The whole diner seemed to lean toward Naomi's father, like a sanctuary around a cornerstone. Humiliation shifted firmly from Harold to the bully. Rage no longer had disguise. "Let's just end this," the bully demanded, voice cracking. "I'll walk out." "You can't." "You won't walk out unmarked," Brooks interjected, softer this time, but the softness carried menace. He pulled a slim wallet from his jacket, flicked it open, and revealed the sleek ID badge with raised lettering, Homeland Security seal shining under fluorescent buzz. Every head craned to look, jaws slack. One of the truckers sighed. "It's real." "Look around," Brooks ordered the bully, voice even and low. "Every face in here has memorized it. Every phone can call newsrooms in minutes. If you think you can vanish after tonight, you're mistaken." The bully froze in place, overwhelmed by humiliation. His fists clenched, but his shoulders sagged in collapse. I just didn't know," his voice softened, broken. "Exactly," Brooks replied. "You don't know. You don't see. That's the problem. You don't see veterans who raised this country. You don't see the elderly who built communities. You don't see my father. Until now." The diner erupted in murmurs of agreement, truckers nodding, the waitress whispering fervent thanks toward Harold, even a young couple whispering, "About time someone put guys like him straight." Harold sipped calmly from his coffee again, shaking slightly but steady in spirit. He gave his son a faint smile. "You always were dramatic." The line pulled laughter, cathartic, filled with release. Even the waitress bit her lip to hide her grin. For the first time, the bully realized he had lost the audience completely. The laughter wasn't his anymore. Director Brooks stood not as a son alone, but as a commander reclaiming narrative. And the bully, once towering with false strength, now shrank under the glow of witnesses stripped of all power. The bully's jaw opened, but no words carried weight anymore. His earlier volume, that thick armor of arrogance, had shrunk to a dripping faucet. He glanced around the diner, desperate for lifelines, but every face turned toward him showed the same verdict: disgust, rejection, a collective wall of judgment he couldn't scale. Director Brooks didn't need to raise his voice. Calm authority already filled the room. "You think this ends when you walk out?" Brooks asked quietly. "It doesn't. Actions have gravity. They trail behind you. And tonight you slapped my father. That gravity will follow." The bully's lips trembled. "Look, man, I made a mistake." Brooks tilted his head slightly, that trained evaluator's gaze sizing him like a living threat assessment. "A mistake is tripping over your shoelace," he replied. "A mistake is forgetting cream in your coffee order. You walked into this diner hungry not for food, but for domination. You chose my father because you thought he'd absorb it quietly. That's not a mistake. That's who you are." The waitress finally found her voice, stepping forward from the counter. Though her hands still shook, her face was fierce. "We all saw it. You didn't just insult him. You laughed doing it. You thought the rest of us would let you." A murmur of agreement hummed through the booths. One trucker raised his calloused hand. "She's right. We're tired of guys like you storming into places like this, thinking you can tear folks down just because you're louder. Well, not tonight." Fury and shame battled in the bully's eyes. "So what? You're gonna lock me up? Over a slap? Over an old man?" Harold finally spoke again, his voice gravel-worn from years but steady. "That old man wore boots in countries you've likely never heard of. That old man carried friends draped across shoulders, so you could sit here and act bigger than you are. Don't lessen my years because they intimidate you." The entire diner stilled at Harold's quiet fire. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't grandstanding. He was just laying bricks of truth one at a time, steady and unshakable. And something inside the bully cracked under that weight. His shoulders sagged, his chin dipped, his whisper nearly lost against the hum of the neon signs. "I didn't know. Brooks exhaled, eyes sharp. Ignorance isn't the shield you think it is. When your arrogance meets someone else's dignity, you don't get to plead that you didn't know. He leaned forward, pressing the words tighter. Here's the difference between you and him. You strike to feel tall. He endured wars, humiliation, battles for rights, and still he rises every morning to drink coffee in peace, causing no harm. My father has more strength in his calm than you'll ever manufacture in a burst of rage. The diner's walls seemed to hum with intensity now. The waitress leaned closer to Harold, gently refilling his cup as though in ritual acknowledgement. A teenager in a booth pulled out his phone but didn't press record. He just stared like he was seeing history, like a story he'd tell 20 years from now. I was there the day a bully slapped a veteran, and the son of Homeland Security turned the whole room into justice. The bully fumbled with his cap again, cheeks burning like he wanted to vanish into the linoleum floor. So what happens now? He muttered. Director Brooks folded his arms. What happens now is you answer for your character, and you live with the truth that the smallest diner in this city witnessed everything. No headline spins you clean. No excuse gets carved onto your skin instead of guilt. One of the truckers chimed in, voice firm. You'll wake up with that sound in your head, your hand hitting his face, and you'll remember all of us seeing it. That's justice enough until the law catches up. The bully shut his eyes tightly, body shrinking further. The wall of shame had climbed so high he couldn't climb out. Harold took a slow sip of his coffee, then glanced at his son. Marcus, let him be. Brooks blinked, startled. What? Harold set the cup down gently. Humiliation can destroy a man faster than fists. He's already beaten. Don't waste government time dragging him off. The world saw. That's enough. Marcus Brooks, the man the entire nation knew only as Homeland Security Director, actually paused. His father's words, even after a lifetime of living in the shadows, still centered him. He nodded reluctantly. If that's how you want it, Dad. Harold turned his gaze back up at the bully, steady, unwavering. You thought tonight you'd teach me a lesson in weakness, but you leave having learned what strength actually looks like. Strength isn't in slapping someone. It's in enduring, protecting, and carrying yourself with dignity. Remember that if you can. The bully's eyes welled with unshed tears. Shame finally breaking past rage. He stumbled backward, muttering, I'm sorry. No one clapped. No one cheered. The silence carried a heavier power, because he wasn't apologizing to win his way out. He was apologizing because Harold's calm crushed whatever ego he had left. Director Brooks finally stepped aside, giving the man space to leave. The diner folk parted just enough for him to pass, their glares cutting deeper than any blade. The bell above the door rang as the bully slipped out into the night, shoulders hunched, the neon flicker swallowing him like a fading ghost. And as the door fell shut, the waitress exhaled loudly, clutching the coffee pot to her chest. The truckers exhaled like men who had just walked out of war. Even the jukebox croaked back to life, spilling a soft tune like it had been waiting for permission. Harold adjusted his jacket, his cheek still red but his pride untouchable. He turned to his son with that same steady glint. Let's finish our coffee, he muttered dryly. It's getting cold. Laughter broke at last, nervous at first, then warm. Relief blossomed through the diner like sunrise through shutters. They all knew they'd carry this story for years, whispered in retellings about the night arrogance collided with humility, and humility refused to fall. By the next morning, the diner's parking lot had already hosted a small crowd of locals. Word traveled fast in towns where gossip spread quicker than smoke, and reputation carved deeper than banners. Those who had been present told their friends, who told more, until the story collected a life of its own. A bully stormed into Miller's diner, slapped Harold Brooks, the black veteran everyone respected, not knowing Harold's son was none other than Homeland Security Director Marcus Brooks. At first, disbelief. People asked, no way, the director? In our town? But as witnesses came forward, truckers, a waitress, a teenage boy with unmistakably wide eyes, the narrative cemented. Harold himself tried to live as if nothing had happened. He still donned the same jacket, walked with the same steady shuffle, ordered his coffee and folded his newspaper. When asked, he'd only offer a faint smile and shrug. I've had worse mornings overseas, he'd say. But the bruise on his cheek caught questions his words could not evade. The waitress, however, couldn't shake it. She called her sister that night, telling it with hushed awe. When Marcus stood up, she whispered, "You could feel the room snap. I've never seen someone shrink like that bully did." Her sister uploaded a post online. "Our town just had the most unreal moment." A Homeland Security director defending his father from a diner thug. True story. Within hours, people from nearby counties were commenting, "Is this real? Name the diner." By the second day, a regional news station parked their van outside Miller's Diner. Camera leaned awkwardly into the small foyer. Reporters crowded the staff between shifts. "Do you confirm?" They pressed. What did he say exactly? The teenage boy who had resisted recording at the time now realized his memory alone made him valuable. "He slammed him," he said on camera. Like not literally, but with words. He said, "Actions have gravity," and you could feel it. On Twitter, the phrase "actions have gravity" began trending late that week, clipped into memes, etched into graphics alongside images of soldiers' flags, and veterans clasping coffee mugs with firm dignity. Marcus Brooks, meanwhile, struggled with what to do next. His staff flooded his phone. "Sir, do we handle this? Should we issue a press release? This could explode." Marcus sat in his Washington office staring at the Capitol through bulletproof glass. His entire life had been calculating risk. Homeland Security lived on probabilities, red lines, thresholds. But this wasn't about policy. It was about his father, about respect, about how easily an old veteran drinking coffee could be viewed as disposable. At one meeting, an aide spoke quietly. "This could humanize you, sir. We don't often get to see government officials as sons, as family. The country could use your words on this." The black veteran humiliated in his own diner. "It's potent," Marcus tightened his jaw. "At the cost of my father's privacy?" But Harold preempted him. One late evening, as father and son sat quietly on the Brooks family porch, Harold swirled the dregs of his coffee and said, "Boy, if this story makes men think twice before disrespecting one more soldier, one more elder, one more black man trying to live in peace, and then let them run it. I've fought wars. I can weather whispers." Marcus looked at him, this man who seemed always smaller in posture but greater in moral gravity. For all his titles, all his classified clearances, Marcus recognized his father was still the highest rank in the room. By Friday, local hero veteran defended by Homeland Security. Sun splashed across newspapers. Photos from Harold's army past appeared, juxtaposed with grainy diner shots. Anchors on national networks debated it, some lauding Harold's dignity, others dissecting abuse of authority claims. Should a Homeland Security director intervene in a personal matter? But each retelling missed one thread. Harold himself didn't speak to cameras. He greeted strangers kindly but refused interviews. His silence only fueled curiosity. The bully, meanwhile, vanished. His name surfaced briefly thanks to diner witnesses, but he disappeared from social media. His apartment leased empty within a week. Attempts to spin apologies online evaporated under floods of comments. Too late. You tried to strike an army vet? No redemption. The waitress, however, became something of a folk hero herself. Booked onto a regional talk radio show, she recalled, voice trembling but fierce. "When Marcus said every one of you is a witness, I realized how important it is to stand up. Silence only protects the cruel." That night, silence protected Harold. She hadn't meant brilliance, but the phrase caught. "Silence protects the cruel" circulated alongside "actions have gravity," slogans, memes, hashtags, all born from a moment never meant for spectacle. Harold chuckled one morning, flipping through papers carrying those lines. "I just wanted my coffee," he muttered, but the pride in his eyes betrayed the truth. Finally, voices carried dignity rather than diminishment. Marcus weighed his father's wishes. When CNN requested an interview, Harold shook his head. "Not me," he chuckled. "But you, son. Tell them what you saw. Tell them what I represented. That's your work now," and so Marcus did. The director sat in studio under glaring lights, camera reflecting every hair out of place. The anchor led bluntly. "Why did this matter so much?" Marcus answered with calm, measured tone, but his heart behind it. "Because dignity matters when no one thinks anyone will see. My father didn't fight for applause. He fought for ordinary breakfasts in quiet diners. And when arrogance struck him, I wasn't there as a government official. I was there as a son. The impact was seismic. The clip replayed across time zones. Hashtags flooded. Veterans groups rallied support. Churches cited his words in sermons. What had been a diner scuffle became America's mirror. How a country treats its elders, its veterans, its minorities, when no spotlight shines. Marcus wasn't embellishing. He wasn't spinning. He was telling the truth. And the nation, unused to unpolished honesty, grabbed hold like rope in storm. Somewhere in that swell, Harold remained calm. Jacket pressed, newspaper folded, coffee steaming, letting the diner hum as always. When thanked by strangers, he'd smile faintly. I've already had my headlines. Let my son keep his. But everyone inside Miller's diner knew. The son may have held Homeland Security clearance, but the father was still the one carrying the firmest backbone. On Sunday morning, Harold walked into Miller's diner like he always did. The same creak of the door hinge, the same bell above the frame, the same waitress greeting him with, "Morning, Mr. Brooks." He tipped his cap, shuffled to his corner booth, and let out a low sigh as he settled in. Coffee first, paper second, his ritual uninterrupted by newspapers now carrying his name. Yet things weren't the same. Not anymore. Two truckers he didn't know rose the moment he stepped inside. "Sir," one said firmly, hat in hand, "coffee's on us today." Harold chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I appreciate that. But coffee's better when you earn it yourself." Still, their eyes gleamed with the kind of admiration that couldn't be bought, only lived. The waitress poured his cup, hand steady. "Whole country talking about you," she said. "Internet, TV, everywhere." Harold sipped, unbothered. "I've had louder mornings." The bruise on his cheek had faded into pale yellow, barely visible now. But everyone who saw him remembered. Not just the slap, but the way he hadn't flinched, the way dignity replaced retaliation. Outside, cameras still came and went, though Marcus had asked for boundaries. He gave one final statement, drawing attention away from personalities and toward principles. This was never about titles. It was about respect. It was about how a nation should treat the people who raised it. The diner isn't just my father's story. It's America's story, about who we are when we think nobody important is watching. Those words filtered into editorials, classrooms, even sermons. Who we are when nobody important is watching became a mantra spun on posters, stitched into banners, tweeted into millions of feeds. The bully? Gone forgotten except as a cautionary tale in retellings. His name mattered to no one. Harold's story mattered to everyone. That evening, Marcus drove back to town, sliding into the opposite side of the booth. Harold looked up, smirk tugging. "Back from saving the nation?" Marcus rolled his eyes affectionately. "Trying to convince them my biggest hero still drinks diner coffee." They sat in silence a while, the way fathers and sons often do when love doesn't need narration. Finally, Marcus leaned in. "Dad, what you did, how you carried yourself. You gave the country something I never could with titles, with clearances. You gave them an example." Harold chuckled low. "I just sat still and drank coffee." Marcus's eyes softened. "Exactly. And in sitting still, you showed strength louder than shouting ever could." The jukebox picked a slow tune. The chatter filled back in, and normalcy wrapped the diner again. But history had already carved itself. For years to come, folks would retell the moment an arrogant bully thought he could slap an elderly veteran, not knowing the man's son was one of the most powerful officials in America. And they'd remember what truly silenced him. Not the title, not the badge, but the unflinching calm of Harold Brooks, a man whose dignity no hand could ever strike down.